Am I illuminated enough?
Hello! Welcome to another AutoCrit Live. And I'm joined today with Gareth and Rayne Hall. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
We're doing this as part of our community writing challenge, which, if you don't know about it, it is our short story challenge we're doing here at AutoCrit. So we thought, what better than to bring on an expert in writing short stories, and that would be Rayne Hall. So thank you so much for joining us today.
And Rayne, I'll give you a moment to kind of introduce yourself as well, because I know a lot of people in our audience already know Rayne and love every time we mention Rayne's coming in. Now, Rayne is, of course, an author, anthology editor herself, which is
Yes.
really great to know about short stories. But I'll give you free reign, Rayne, if you want to just introduce yourself for a minute.
Now, what shall I choose to say? Well, I'm Rayne. I'm a writer. I write lots of books. I have about 90 or so books published, some of them published in several languages. Non-fiction, novels, short stories. Most of my fiction tends to be sort of creepy gothic horror. I've also written other genres. In case you're wondering about my accent, I am German and I lived for many, many years in England and now I live in Bulgaria. So the accent is actually British English with a German accent. But it doesn't show when I'm writing.
Great. Now, we are here today, as you know in the title, everybody, to talk about short stories and specifically as well to help you with any issues that you might be facing as we're kind of 1 week in or halfway through this year's challenge. So please do interact today. Pop in the chat, kind of any questions you might have, any problems that you're running into. Let us know the details of what ails you, and we'll see if we can. Any one of us can help really with some great advice. But I want to talk with a few introductory things because you had some great tips that you wanted to talk about anyway, Rayne, when it came to short stories.
Yes.
And the first one, because a lot of people do talk about this, and I think it's an important topic when we're talking about short stories, is how to prevent it from getting too long. Do you have
Yes,
any
or how to
thoughts
rein
there?
it back in once it has already grown too long. Because in my experience, short stories grow and grow and grow. They sort of spread out and they grow tentacles. And many of them have ambitions to become novels. And maybe one day you can turn them into a novel, but for now you just need to keep them short and keep them confined to the short story format. Also, a big problem when short stories grow too long is they also grow boring. They just outgrow their content. They start to drag, they start to get unfocused. So today I want to show you a few professional tricks how to keep the short story within the short story format, within a tight word count, and how to keep it focused and tight and exciting.
Awesome. Please do. Where
We're
would you like
all
to start?
ears.
I know there's the one that you suggested was number one, condensing time, keeping an eye on the time frame that things happen.
Yes, this is the easiest trick of them all. The shorter the time frame within the story, within which the story unfolds, the shorter the story will be. So if you have a short story draft and the plot events unfold over 1 month, condense the time frame. Let it all unfold within 1 week. If you have 1 week and that story is too long, then make it a day. And if you want a really short story, let it unfold within an hour or within an afternoon. I promise the story will be much shorter if you don't allow it much time. If you're just starting out planning a story, obviously you can set yourself the time frame and you can say, okay, this is all going to happen in one afternoon. If you've already written a draft and it's quite long, then think about it. Can you possibly condense that time frame? You probably can. It may mean that you have to change quite a few things,
Mm-hmm.
but it will work superbly. I know that from experience because I used to be the most dragging writer. I used to write short stories which were about 10 times longer than they should have been, and they used to get rejected. You know, well, the editors were usually too polite to say this is dragging drivel, but they were just far, far too dull, too long. There were too many words for the plot, and there were too many things happening which did not actually carry the story forward. I just put too much in, and I had to learn to keep my stories short. And what I have learned, that's what I'm ready to tell you about.
Perfect. Yeah, I could tend to find that that can be a real problem with some novels as well, even in the longer format. When you end up with a really dragging Act Two, for example, in the beginning, it's because of decisions like, well, when they arrive at this place, I need it to be 2 weeks later that this thing happens, and it's always why? Why does it need to be 2 weeks later?
Yes. Beginnings are often good candidates for cutting, not just in novels, in short stories too. Very often we need to write those beginnings like a kind of warm-up exercise for ourselves as writers, and then chop it off. And immediately you've saved 1,000 words or whatever.
Perfect. And there was another tip that I guess goes into skipping through a lot of stuff, basically, that you sent over to me too, which was reducing the number of locations that's actually used in the story. What would you say
Yes.
about that?
Now, I love locations. That's what I enjoy most, writing about settings. But when you need to keep a story short, use as few locations as possible. It will be much, much shorter, much more condensed. So if you have a story where the first scene takes place in a playground, the second takes place in the kitchen, the third in the child's bedroom, the fourth in a shop, just condense them and see if you can actually let all of them, or at least some of them, play out in the kitchen or wherever. This will be remarkably shorter then.
Much less descriptive time trying to set up each area and kind of drinking it in.
There is that, yes, and also because you may then be able to make much faster transitions from one to the other, from one scene to the other.
Yeah. And speaking of reduction, I was looking at the little list of things that you suggested as well, was reducing the number of characters. How do you stop the... we've had some questions about this in our previous streams. Was this kind of how many characters is too many for a short story, or how many is ideal? I'm not sure there's a
I
real
wouldn't
answer
want
there,
to
but...
make any rules as to how many characters a short story should have. Your short story should have as many characters as it needs, but not more. Now, most stories need 3 characters if they're quite short. It's difficult to pull off a really good story with just 2 characters, although it is possible. A longer story may have 4, 5 characters, 6, possibly 7. If you have more than that, it's very much in danger of becoming a novella. But use as many characters as you really need, which may not be as many characters as you think. If your story has grown beyond the scope of a short story, if it's just grown unwieldy and too long, then combine characters. Every character in your short story fulfills certain roles. It's like you are giving them a job to do.
Yeah.
Combine those roles, those jobs, and give them to one character. Let's say you're writing a story about some kind of conflict between John and Mary. And as well as those 2 main characters, John and Mary, you have a dozen others, like there is John's mother and there is Mary's piano teacher. Well, if John's mother is Mary's piano teacher, not only will you have your characters, will the story be shorter, will the character be richer, there will also be the whole fabric of the story much denser. It will all be more focused, more exciting, much richer. And do this with all your supporting characters. So the neighbor is also the leader of the church choir, or whatever characters you require. Just give each character several jobs to do, and you can condense the cast, and you save a lot of wordage.
I think that's a fabulous idea for kind of creative richness as well, because if you start giving, what could appear on the surface as conflicting roles to one character, so how do they then intersect and play based on what this character has to do, is that's a lot of fun.
Yes. It just adds an extra dimension to every character, and extra dimensions make the whole story more. Well, it gives this whole story more dimension. It gives them more depth, and you will find that this actually really lifts your story to a higher level.
Wonderful. I did notice just one topic, a question or comment there from Wendy, which I think ties into what we're talking about here, because we've just been talking about stripping it back. And Wendy was saying, my problem is making it long enough. Have you any thoughts on that side?
Yes. How long are we talking? How long is your story now, and how long do you want it to be?
There
Okay, Wendy?
We'll see if
crux.
she answers. Yeah. We do have, if for people who are submitting to this challenge, we do have a range of word count we're looking for. So it could be that she's finding it difficult to reach the word count of her goal. Oh, it looks like she's at 2,777.
This is the complete first draft. Okay, and how long do you want it to be?
Probably over 3,000 words, since that's the limit. That's the minimum for our challenge, right?
No, our minimum is 2,000,
Oh.
maximum 5,000.
I forgot that.
Anywhere in
Okay.
that bracket is fine.
All right, so.
Okay. Now, if you just want to add a few hundred words, then I recommend adding descriptions. But take care not to add boring, dragging descriptions which the readers are not interested in. Pick interesting details, interesting visual details, sounds, smells. Each time the point of view character enters a new location, insert a smell. Write what the place smells like. Then throughout that scene, insert little bits of background noises. In the distance, a church clock chimed, or here in Bulgaria, stock bills clapped or rattled, or goat bells chinked, that sort of thing. You may have motors whooshing past. You may have seagulls screeching. Whatever happens in that story, add a bit of sounds. And in a story of, say, 5,000 words, you can easily add about 20 or so sentences just describing sounds. They won't be boring. They will be exciting. They will actually add to the setting. And if each sentence is 20 words long on average, that's 20 times 20 is, who's good at arithmetic? Is it 400 words? So that will already make your story quite a bit longer. So that sort of description is a good way of fleshing out the story without putting in dull padding. Have you worked out what the story question is? Like there is a kind of question you pose at the beginning of the story. Will Mary win the first prize in the village flower show? Will John get that job? Whatever, yeah, anything the readers root for, what the character wants to achieve. And you are ending the story with, well, the character has either achieved it or not, or perhaps partially. Now, to lengthen the story, add another conflict, add another obstacle, make it more difficult, and in particular, introduce a character, or better still, use one of the characters you already have, who becomes a serious rival or opponent who will try to stop the character from achieving this. So if John wants that job, and you've all written about his professional efforts and how he networks with people in that company and so on, but you have his wife as a minor character, and she's very supportive in the current version. Let her oppose him in this. She does not want him to take this job because this job would mean that he has less time at home with her, or this job would mean that they have to move to a big city, which he hates. And so she tries to sabotage his ambition in some way or other.
Mm-hmm.
She may openly argue with him about it, or she may subtly manipulate him or sabotage his efforts. And this will make the story certainly longer and also exciting, but it will keep the story focused on the goal you've set your character. So it won't pad it out, it won't distract from the actual story, it will just make it richer and longer. Does this answer your question, Wendy?
I can see Wendy saying that the story is complete, so it's kind of the heart of the story is there, I'm guessing, on the page. So it may be a case of just a little more atmosphere.
Atmosphere is fun.
Perfect. Great. There was another topic
I
that you
can't
had.
actually see a list of participants here. Can I call that up or not?
If you can see it on this platform that we're on, it should be on the right-hand side. There's like a big live.
There,
No.
now I see it. Yes, under comments. Yes, I found it. Oh, lots of comments, lots of them. Because I was feeling like I was sort of facing a blank white wall.
No. We've got lots of people listening, right?
Right. Interesting things.
I'm kind of thinking about the.
Oh,
kind
you were told there would be no math today. Oh, I do apologize. Yes. Yes. I hate maths too, almost as much as I hate chemistry and housework.
There was a comment that I thought quite nicely segued from that, what we're talking about, kind of expanding or compressing. Jim mentioned, now that I think about the time compression concept, that will prevent my story from dragging. And I know, Rayne, you did have some thoughts on pacing, how to handle that in a short story, whether you need to slow it down a bit or speed it up.
Yes. My problem as a writer used to be my stories dragged. They had a horribly dragging pace. And everyone said, oh, stories need to be fast-paced. Neither is ideal. Well, it can be. But some short stories work well with a slow pace. And some need fast pace. So don't let anyone tell you that your story needs to be fast-paced, needs to race ahead, because for some subjects, that's just not right, not ideal. On the other hand, your story, it can be very slow-paced, but it must not drag. There's a big difference between slow-paced and dragging. So first of all, you need to understand your story, whether it's the kind of story which calls for a slow pace, or whether it's the kind of story which calls for a very fast pace. Now, a fast-paced story would be something with lots of action, where you may have sword fights and car chases and that sort of thing, whereas a slower-paced story may be about family drama and more emotional conflicts. So some stories are overall slower paced, some need to be overall faster paced. But now here's a professional tip. No story should be slow paced throughout, and no story should be fast paced throughout. Because if you keep the pace always at one level, always fast or always slow, it feels flat. What you need to do is vary the pace. So in a slow-paced story, there should be at least one moment when the pacing picks up. And then it can go to slow pace again. And in a fast-paced story, you need at least one, probably several moments when the pace actually slows. This prevents it from being flat. You need this rhythm of this up and down. You need to keep the reader awake. Now, how do you do that? There are a few tricks you can use. And first of all, identify which are the slow-paced scenes or moments and which are the fast-paced moments. This depends on what the main character is doing. If the main character is engaged in something really fast, let's say she is running for her life very fast, then you need to apply fast-paced fast-paced techniques.
Yeah.
And if she is in a situation where she doesn't do anything, maybe can't do anything, perhaps she is just lying on the couch, or perhaps she's locked into a prison cell and can't get out, can't do anything, or maybe she is a sniper who for hours has to lie still, unable to do anything. This is when you write with slow-paced scenes, slow-paced techniques. So once you've identified this, then you choose some sentences and slow the pace of them or speed it up. First thing, the easiest, is the sentence length. If you have a long sentence, it will create a sensation of slow pace. If you have a super short sentence, it will feel fast-paced. And if you have several very short sentences, one after the other, it will feel breathless. So while your character is running for her life, use very short sentences. You can even use sentence fragments, sentences which are not complete, and leave out unnecessary words to make those sentences very short. I'll just try and give you an example. I'm making up a sentence in my head now. Mary selected the imitation crocodile leather handbag from her wardrobe, slid back the bolt to open the bedroom door, and proceeded down the stairs. So that is slow pace. Yeah? She's obviously not in a hurry. The same thing in fast pace would be Mary grabbed a bag, unbolted the door, and raced downstairs. Mm-hmm. It's more or less the same thing, but it's shorter and feels faster. And it leaves out the details, like if Mary is really, really in a hurry, she will grab the nearest available bag and she will not carefully select the crocodile leather imitation bag. And if you do this, the whole scene or the paragraph or whatever you want to have as fast-paced will feel fast-paced. Once you've done it with the sentences, you can do the same thing with paragraphs. Long paragraphs just visually signal slow pace. So if Mary is lying with her rifle as a sniper and unable to move for several hours, you want to convey slow pace, so you use long paragraphs as well as long sentences. But if she's running for her life or she's chasing after the serial killer or whatever, then the pace needs to be fast, and so you use short paragraphs as well as short sentences. And next is the same again with words. Short words create a sense of fast pace. whereas long words create a sense of more slow pace. So if you want your scene or your paragraph to have a fast-paced feel, use the shortest available word. The English language has so many synonyms. Just pick the shortest one that fits.
It's true.
And try to stick to words of 1 or 2 syllables, maybe occasionally 3 syllables. But no 4 or 5 syllabic words in the fast-paced section. Whereas if you go to a slow-paced section, you can indulge in some longer words. Now you use quite a few 3-syllable words, maybe a few 4-syllabic words. You can even have something longer if it fits. And the whole thing will just slow down the pace or feel like the pace has slowed down. Now, the action will be slow anyway, because that's how you've conceived the story. So you need to adapt the writing style to fit the content. Next, in the fast-paced sections, think of great verbs, very, very vivid verbs. They will speed up the writing no end. Whereas in the slower paced sections, you can use some adjectives. You can even use some adverbs in the slow paced sections. Whereas in the fast paced sections, I would use very few adjectives and probably no adverbs at all. So instead of she proceeded quickly down the stairs, you would write she raced down the stairs. Okay, are you with me? It's a bit funny.
Proceeded
Although I
quickly
can
down
see
the rickety
content
stairs.
now, but I can't see the people's faces, and I still feel a bit like I'm talking at a whiteboard. I can see you two, but I can't see the people.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
on this platform, you're not going to see their video cams. You're just going to see their comments. So.
Okay, then I'll need to look at the comments.
Let's at this point, I think, as we've been going, have you been marking some comments, Daniel?
Yeah, if you go, I don't know if you can see the ones that I've starred, but if it's shared, otherwise I can start showing.
Oh yes, no, I can. Awesome. I think we'll hit some questions here. So we've got about 30 minutes. Catch up and make sure people have questions answered is most important, I think. We had one from Matazone. Question: what's the current trend in publishing short stories that are a complete character arc or gripping and satisfying scenes as if plucked from the middle of a bigger story?
There are so many short story markets these days, and they all have different requirements. So it's a matter of picking the kind of markets which want the kind of story you are writing. There are possibly more short story markets than ever in publication history. So anything goes, really.
Do you have a personal preference when you put out an anthology call? Do you like it to be your kind of standard, well, a condensed 3-act arc, or do you really care as long as it's impressive?
Oh, as far as plot, structure, pacing, and so on are concerned, I like variety. I like it if every story in my anthology is different. So some of them may be like slice of life stories, which are the ones which feel like they're sliced out of a bigger story. Some are complete stories. Some have happy endings, some have unhappy endings. What I'm after really is, and really actively I'm looking for, is stories from different cultural backgrounds. Brilliant. I really look for those. And those can be of any plot structure.
We have one here. I'm not sure if you have a lot of experience in this regard, but why not ask while we're here? Q Morton wondering. I want to do a children's short story for for an elementary age, but need assistance on how the vocabulary or the voice should be or sound.
I will pass on that. I'm not an expert on children's writing.
Yeah, Daniel, any? Are you
I've
deep in the world of
never written.
children's stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I've taught children. I will say, you do have to keep in mind vocabulary, but to some degree, that is somewhat subjective, right? Because I do know some writers that try to, challenge children with maybe throwing in words that they're going to have to look up, and that's part of the experience. And then there are others that really do try to speak conversationally at the level they're at, and that is somewhat subjective. I've certainly seen works for children that have a rich vocabulary. It's not a requirement to dumb it down too much. It just depends.
Oh, I just see an interesting question here. May I?
Sure.
Yes. Yeah.
What about a long sentence with commas for faster action?
Yes.
Now that's a technique for pacing. What you do is you can leave out the word end and just list several actions with commas in between, and that will feel very, very fast-paced. Remember the sentence I made up about Mary? Let me see if I can still remember it. Mary grabbed a bag, unbolted the door, raced down the stairs. Now the complete sentence, if you structure it the conventional way, would be Mary grabbed a bag, unbolted the door, and raced down the stairs. By leaving out the word and just replacing it with a comma, you get this sense of breathlessness. She is racing down the stairs. Yeah. So this is a technique you can certainly use when you want a sentence, a paragraph, or part of a scene to be extremely fast-paced. But use this technique sparingly. Don't write a whole story like this.
All right. We had somebody that they had spent the first week trying to figure out which idea to use, and they haven't written anything. So what would you suggest?
Oh no.
Somebody has too many ideas and they can't figure out which one to pick. What do you have any strategies on that? What do you think?
Well, it's a bit late for me to give advice on this now. I can tell you what I would have done. On day one, I would have made a list of ideas, and then I would have asked the writer friend to pick one and tell me which one to write.
Oh.
That's one of the great things of being part of a community. Just ask them what to write.
And there's still time. We've still got a week. So I think if you want to do that, share the ideas around, pop into the community, post a list of them, see what people, maybe do a little poll and create a poll and say, which one should I do? And just take on the challenge. Do it.
Well, they have more time than that too, because when does the cutoff, right, to submit? Because once it opens, there's a bit of a gap there too, right?
Yeah, technically speaking, if you want to go for the submission, it would be the end of next week. But
So, you know how writers are. We look for the loopholes.
I think this is not about loopholes. I think this is about procrastination.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's also a writer norm, right? Here's one. Do you feel ideas have a size, or can a story be any length? I guess that's like, how do you determine the amount of time you need to tell your idea? What do you think? That's not an easy answer. But...
When I was new to writing, I found this difficult. Certain kinds of plot work best at certain lengths. And I've learned from experience to judge what kind of length the story needs. So if I now have a plot idea, I have a feel, well, this one is going to be 1,000 to 2,500 words, or this one will need 4,000 to 6,000 words. So I have a pretty good idea. Often it turns out to be longer than I thought, but I'm getting a pretty good idea. And then I develop a rough plot outline for that length. The way to learn how to judge it is A, write a lot of stories. After a while, you'll find it. B, when you've written the first draft, let other writers read it, kind of honest writers who will tell you, oh no, this drags, or this is too rushed. And yet another possibility is read a lot of stories. The more stories you read, the more you'll develop a feel for what kind of story needs what kind of length. But there are no rules.
Yes, there are no concrete rules in anything. I think as long as the story stays focused and engaging, it's as long as it needs to be.
I like this one because this is dealing with essentially a rule. Can a short story not have a conflict and yet still be gripping to readers? That's a weird question. What do you think?
I would say no. A story needs a conflict to be gripping to readers, but a conflict does not need to be sort of super active and ferocious and violent or aggressive. There don't have to be people hating each other. It could be something very, very subtle, very gentle, as long as you have two characters who want something, each of them wants something, and the two don't mesh. This may be a very, very subtle conflict. These two characters may love each other dearly, and each of them may want the best for the other, but there is a bit of something that does not quite work together. And the characters may both be in denial about it, even. But the reader who reads the story gets that there is actually this conflict, which even the characters are not aware of. So there is a lot you can do with subtle conflict. I would say, yes, a story needs conflict, but you can define conflict in many different ways.
Perfect.
Right.
And there's a personal one here. Yeah, Rayne, where are you on the Panzer plotter spectrum? I know you've kind of talked about that a little bit with your outlines.
Well, I am both. I'm both. I'm somewhere in the middle, perhaps, but not always for every story the same. With some stories, I just sit down and write, and I write and write and write, and I have a finished story draft. And with others, I have an idea, and then I think about how can I develop this idea, what kind of character would be in this situation, what do they want, what obstacles will they encounter, who are they in conflict with, and how are events going to unfold, what will the character do? And then I write an outline, and I roughly structure it in scenes, and then I write each scene. So these are the two extremes. But with some stories, it's part. I start by just writing because I have only the vaguest of ideas what this story might be about. And it's not even a story yet. It's just a setting or a character or some small thing. And I just write and write and write and write, free writing until, oh, it's getting interesting. This is what I'll write about. And then I'll start thinking and planning and plotting and outlining. And once I got that, I will go back to just free writing, perhaps about each scene. And then I'll go back to plotting. So I switch from one to the other, but it varies really from scene to scene. So I earn from story to story. And I would say whatever works for you, that's what you need to do. But try the other method too, just because changing your working methods can sometimes really kickstart the imagination and the creativity.
Awesome. 100% agree on that one as well. And we have Willie. That's
Well, if you always agree with me, Gareth, that's boring. We need conflict.
I'm gonna have to start arguing here in a minute. And well, Willie, what if out of 5 characters, 3 are in and out, no more than 20 to 30 words each, and 1 is about the victim?
I don't understand that question.
Not sure about the end part there. It makes much sense. If we had 5 characters in the story, 3 of them are just kind of showing up and just immediately disappearing.
Are they actually characters or are they spare characters?
Yeah.
They are carriers. If they are just walk-ons and not really characters, they don't count. Yeah. So if your if John and Mary are having lunch in a bistro, the waitress who serves them the coffee is not a character. Unless she pours the coffee over John's head or whatever. These people who are just sort of walking on and off without actively playing a role in the plot, they don't count as characters in the sense of story plotting.
Yeah, they're set dressing.
Yeah. It sounds harsh, and they would probably insult it to know that, but who cares?
They don't exist. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, they are really, well, yes, you call it set dressing. They are kind of moving scenery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For the purposes of the story, yes.
And David was wondering, I guess, going towards your planning there, when it happens, Rayne, do you always know what your ending is before you start writing?
Not always. With some stories, I know how I want it to end, and that's what I write towards. But sometimes the characters decide differently, and on occasion, I've written a story and the ending just didn't feel right, so I changed it. That has happened too. And also, I've written some stories where I had no clue where this was going. Like I once wrote a story about a young woman who was alone in the middle of the night at an abandoned railway station. And she had gotten out of a train and wanted to take the next train, but there was no more train coming. And she was just there alone in the dark in a strange place on a bench on a railway station. And I thought, what now? Yes, I got her there. What is going to happen? I really had no idea. I thought, maybe there will be wolves, or is there a serial killer, or is there a stalker, or is she going to walk? Or I had really no idea where I was going to take this. And I wrote a bit, experimenting with different endings, and just nothing really worked. And then I suddenly had one idea which worked. And once I'd written that, I thought, yes, of course. I should have known it from the start that this was going to end like this. So yes, sometimes I surprise myself.
You think at the end, it's like, this was the only way it could have ended. How could I not have seen that before?
Certainly the best way for this story to end. It just made sense. It just was so in keeping with the character and her situation and the backstory. I should have seen it, really.
Do you have any tips on kind of getting to that place? We do have a couple of questions coming up here of, well, number one, where and how to end. And also Anne was asking, she sort of thinks she knows what the ending is, but not sure how to get there. If you have any operational tips on what you do, I guess, rather than just, I know, sitting there and thinking about it, sometimes it just comes to you. But
okay, now if you the ending needs to satisfy the reader. This is a rule. If we're allowed to have any rules, the ending needs to satisfy the reader. It's getting dark in here. Do you also see me sort of like a ghost? I'll just turn on the light just a moment.
It might be. It's perfectly on brand, Rayne.
There you go. Right, it's a little gothic zoom.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. We're just bringing it up to the modern era.
Yes, I'm back. Okay. Yes, I was, because we are not dealing specifically with horror here, so that wouldn't be quite appropriate. Okay, the ending needs to satisfy the reader. This doesn't mean that it needs to be happy. The ending will satisfy the reader if it answers the question you raised at the beginning of the story. So go back. You have, or should have, in the first few paragraphs, a question. Like, will Mary win the first prize in the village flower show? Or whatever. So the ending will be when Mary either has won the first prize in the flower show, or she won only the runner-up prize, or she got disqualified from the flower show, or whatever. The reader needs to know whether or not the character has achieved this. So when you look at that question you've asked, that you've raised in the reader's mind in that first paragraph or the first few paragraphs, you will know how you need to end your story. If you want to write a happy ending, then the answer is yes. The character has achieved this. If you want an unhappy ending, the answer is no, the character has failed. Either can be satisfactory, but you can give them more depth. If you want a happy ending, make it a modified happy ending. Yes, she has achieved it. Yes, she has won the first prize in the flower show, but it came at a price. And that price that she had to pay for it, she won the first prize, but she lost her best friend because of it. Or yes, she won the first prize, but she achieved this by cheating and she lost her integrity.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of yes, but story has much more depth than one which is simply yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, she's won the first prize in the flower show, but another participant is so unhappy about it because it would have meant so much to her that actually now the main character wishes she hadn't won it, but that woman would.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a lot with that. Similarly, if you write an unhappy ending, the character fails to achieve it. Let them get something else instead, an unexpected boon. No, she did not win the first prize in the flower show, but she made a good friend. No, she did not win the first prize in the flower show, but she got elected president of the flower show committee. Something like that, yeah? So this is how you create a satisfying ending. Now, how do you get from the beginning to the end? Keep the character's goal in the reader's mind all the time. So let the character say to someone else, I really want to win first prize in this flower show. Or let another character say, I bet this year you will win. Or let her care for her roses and really pamper her flowers so that they grow nice and big and healthy for the flower show. Just keep this goal in mind all the time. And put obstacles into her, in her way. Don't make it easy. Whatever she tries to do, put an obstacle in her way. So she really, really takes care of her roses, and then they get infested with black fly. The day before the flower show, the stalks are infested with black fly. Or she really looks forward to that flower show, but her husband reminds her it's their wedding anniversary and they are going away on the flower show day. So if she now still enters the flower show, she will alienate her husband. So that's not a good thing either. And so you put lots of obstacles in her way, and she is trying to overcome them one by one. The final obstacle should be one where the main character grows, becomes wiser, tries something a bit different, and actually becomes more mature, becomes a better person. Perhaps the first few obstacles she tried to overcome by cheating. And those were doomed to failure. And the final obstacle she actually solves by being honest. Or perhaps with the first few obstacles, she tried to win by being stingy and mean And then the final obstacle she solves by actually being generous and helping her rivals. And that's what helps her to achieve the breakthrough. Yeah, does that answer your question?
I think that likely covers, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the flower show stories now.
I
Everybody's
know.
inspired.
Who knew there was so much intrigue in flower shows? That's amazing. I love it.
Well, I just tried to pick something which is relatively
Yeah, no, it's
unexciting,
great.
just to show it as an example how you can
Yeah.
really develop anything
Of
into a
course.
story.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
It's like, let's
I
not
love
go
it.
straight to grim like I always do. Now we have one from Candace here, and I think your answer there, Rayne, probably ties a lot into this in terms of writing the beginning and end first easily, but losing momentum in the middle and kind of abandoning the project. I think it might be a case of kind of in that middle, keeping up that idea of conflict and mixing up the conflict.
Yes, but now my question for Candace is, does the problem lie with the story or does the problem lie with you? Because if you write the beginning and ending first and you're still excited about the project and it just flows, and then what can happen is that you actually grow bored with it, and it's not the story that loses momentum, but you do. That can happen as well. So I'm just wondering if possibly this is what may be happening in your case. When it happens to me, this where I lose the momentum in the story, the story just no longer excites me. I set it aside for some months and then I get back into it. Of course, when there is a tight deadline, you can't do that. The other thing I like to do is to give the story to other writers to read and get their reactions, because that often rekindles my passion for the story. Does that kind of answer your question, Kenneth?
Yeah, I'm hoping it might be one of those things. There's a lot of times you write something and just lose it and come back to it after a long time and go, it's always still stayed in your mind the whole time that it's bad. But then after that time away, you start reading it, you think this isn't half bad. I'm going to pick this back up again.
Like,
When
she agrees.
a story doesn't work, when it sort of peters out, or it just no longer feels right, or just doesn't get off the ground, I set it aside for months, sometimes for years. And the interesting thing is, when I look at story drafts that I've written 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I look at them and I immediately say, that's what's wrong with it. I need to write it in a different tense, put it in a different location, change the point of view character or whatever. Once I've got the distance, I just see at a glance what's wrong with it. And I know how to fix it. And then I get excited about the story again.
And quite a little technical one. I might know the answer to this one, but Ed, in a short story, is there a magic ratio of dialogue versus narration?
You want the formula rule to stick to? You're not getting one from me. There are short stories which consist almost exclusively of dialogue, and they are great. And there are short stories which have no dialogue at all, and they can be great too.
Yeah.
So whatever is right for your story.
And how important is describing physical appearance of supporting characters?
Very little. What I would do is I would just mention one or two features, not more. One sentence describing how they move, their body shape and how they move, or their face and what kind of lipstick they wear, or whatever. Just one sentence woven into the plot is enough for describing a minor character, just enough that the reader knows this is an old man or it's a young woman. Or whatever they need to know about it, you don't need more. And write this obviously in an original way, but don't get into detailed description of minor characters. In many cases, you don't even need detailed descriptions of the major characters. Physical descriptions are often not necessary. They can be necessary, for example, if your point of view character is an artist who is painting a portrait for a client, then obviously the client's physical appearance is important because that's what the story is about, how the artist is painting this person. Or if you write a story about models in a fashion show, then quite likely their body shapes play a role, like whether or not they fit into those clothes. I used to be a fashion editor long ago, and there was always a problem. Were the models really slim enough to fit into the small clothes? So for some things, physical appearance matters, but usually less than the writers think and very little for the minor characters.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think with shorts as well, economy, you don't really have the word count space to be just chucking in
Yes,
all
yes.
sorts of description and everything that doesn't really matter. Use the most of it. I think we'll probably have time before we have to say goodbye. Sorry if we haven't caught up with everybody's questions, but I think we'll have one more. Corey was wondering there, what about figurative language? Can you use simile and metaphor in fast-paced sections, or would that slow it down?
Simile and metaphor would generally work better in the slower paced sections, but you can use them in the fast paced sections as long as they are something that's really close to the action and expressed in short words. Now, simile, when the point of view character mentally compares something with something else, this looks like or it sounds like, or it is bigger than, faster than, require a mental thought. When the pace is extremely fast, like the character is running for her life, or she is engaged in a sword fight, or something like that, she will not have time to think because all her energy goes towards that one thing, like running, 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 running. She will not have the time, the mental energy to compare something mentally with something else.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, in the extremely fast-paced sections, I would probably not use similes, but I might use them in the moderately fast-paced sections if they are not requiring too complex thought processes for the point of view character.
Perfect. And I guess one more. Danielle, do short story readers expect the same sort of genre-specific tropes that's common in longer works?
This depends on the market. Some markets, some anthologies, e-zines, are looking for a specific kind of stories, and the readers who buy that kind of magazine or that kind of anthology will look for the kind of story that is promised to them, and that varies greatly. As an anthology editor, I would say use the tropes and turn them on their head, interpret them in a fresh way. That would be the way to stand out.
Perfect and surprising. Awesome. Right. Well, I think we're just about to hit up time there. Sorry if we didn't get to everybody's questions, but I'm sure at some point in the future we'll have Rayne back, most likely to talk to everyone again. But thank you all for being here. Daniel, I'll let you do the like and subscribe stuff, whatever side you're on.
Yes. Well, marketing guy. All right. So, yes, if you enjoyed this conversation, we have lots of conversations like this for our AutoCrit community. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell, share this link with your friends. Yes, we'll have Rayne back sometime, I'm sure. And we've done events with Rayne exclusively for our community as well. And if you're an AutoCrit member, well, you could go back to the archives and take a look at those discussions. And she's also involved in the Nightmare Fuel class. So keep an eye out for that as it comes up, because lots of great tips there. So other than that, we're rolling along with this community writing challenge. We will be back. What is it? Thursday, right?
I believe it's Thursday.
Yep, Thursday, and we're going to be doing a live edit, which will be fun. I've never actually done one of those before, so this could be fun and exciting. But apparently, we're going to get some work, and we're going to show you how we would line edit, how we would developmental edit, all that fun stuff right in front of your eyes, so you can see the magic unfold. That'll be lots of fun. So check that out, and yeah, like, subscribe, and we will see you around the AutoCrit community. Thanks again, Rayne and Gareth.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. And again, thank you to Rayne. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.